Hello, how's everybody doing? Have a good weekend, I hope. It's a little soggy out there, unfortunately. It's supposed to keep raining, but hopefully you got to enjoy your weekend a bit. And let's see, what announcements did I have? Oh, the next assignment's coming up on Thursday, I think. The web Caesar. It's due Thursday, so hopefully you've been working on that. If you have questions about that, when we break up into small groups, make sure to talk to your TFs or flag me down as I'm doing my laps, and happy to answer any questions you have about web Caesar. The assignments are going to keep coming, so there'll be a few more before the end of this unit. Make sure you're keeping an eye on that calendar, make sure you're getting everything submitted on time, and let us know if you have any questions or need any help. I know I've already mentioned this once or twice, but just again, a reminder that they've got a trivia night coming up here at LaunchCode, so I'm hopefully going to be there myself. It should be a lot of fun. I love trivia. If you guys want to sign up, I think there's a link on the Facebook page for LaunchCode, so go check that out. And I think that's it in terms of logistics and announcements. Does anybody have any questions about upcoming due dates or upcoming scheduling stuff before we hop into material? All right, cool. So the topic for today is validation. We're going to talk all about validation today. So as usual, we'll start with some high-level questions, some high-level review questions, and then we've got a walkthrough. We're going to hop into our flipped list application and do some coding in just a moment. So for starters, let's just justify why we're even talking about this in the first place. Why do we need validation? What's the big deal? What's validation doing for us? Oh, I thought this was the easy one. Yeah.
Make sure people are putting in the information, the type of information we want.
Yeah, so we're asking our users to give us stuff, and we're expecting them to give us certain things, but they hopefully will give us that stuff, and it's possible that they won't. They'll give us some garbage. They'll give us some stuff that doesn't work. So we need to be prepared for that, and we need to be prepared to notify our users when they do something incorrectly. Now, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they want to tell us the correct information, although that's not always true. Sometimes they'll be messing with us, or sometimes they're just not very smart and don't type in the right stuff. But we're gonna assume that they mean well and try and give them feedback about what exactly we're looking for should we not get something that we're looking for. So give me some examples of validation. What might we use validation for? I know a couple were mentioned in the prep work, but what are some situations you could imagine that we would need to do some validation, or some situations that maybe you've seen as you're using certain websites of validation that they're performing? Emails. So emails have to have an @ sign and then usually a .com or a .net or a .something on the end, so they can do some validation on that. What else? Passwords. So passwords are kind of a special kind of validation. Oops, I hit the wrong button, sorry. Passwords are kind of a special validation. They need to match, whatever is currently stored. In fact, we're going to talk about how to do passwords in a few weeks, I think. So yes, password validation, very, very, very important. What else? What else we got? I'm sorry? Data. I can't hear you, whoever that is.
Date and time.
Oh, date and time, thanks. Yeah. So if you have to type in your birth date, for example, a lot of places want it in a particular format. So you have to enter it in that format. I just saw one last night. Credit cards have to have 16 digits, usually. And actually, those numbers mean something. The actual credit card numbers mean something. They can examine, I think it's the first 4 numbers, and tell whether it's a Visa or a MasterCard, or I'm not sure exactly on the specifics. What? Oh, it's just the first 1 digit? Okay, interesting. Yeah, cool. And then that security code on the back there's some mathematical formula about how it matches up with your credit card number and the expiration date, I think. And like I said, I'm not clear on the specifics, but they check all that stuff when you type in your credit card number to make sure that it's legitimate. Cool. So there's lots of other types of validation. that exists in the world. And validation actually can take more interesting forms as well. For example, we talked about dates and times, and if somebody asks you to type in a birth date, you might be looking for a specific format. But they're also probably going to be checking that you don't enter your birth date as, 1750 or something outrageous like that, or in the future as well, right? You can't be born in the future either. So there are many different flavors of validation in the world, and as you become more and more experienced programmers, you will see people enter in all kinds of weird stuff that you weren't expecting. So validation is a huge part, making robust and sturdy programs. So what do we do when we receive invalid data? There's a couple ways we can approach this. I actually sort of spoiled this question a little bit a few minutes ago. What do we do if they tell us something bad? Say enter in I'm sorry?
Inform them that they looked at the wrong.
We're going to tell them they screwed up and then ask them to do it again, usually. We're going to ask them to do it over. There are alternatives. We don't always have to tell them that they screwed up, although that's probably the most common way of doing it. Sometimes it might be nice to try and fix it. So one example is, maybe I'm collecting phone numbers and I want all my phone numbers to have a certain format with the parentheses and the dashes and all that. Maybe somebody doesn't type it in correctly, but they give me, 10 digits. Well, okay, I'll fix it for them. I'll put in the parentheses and the dashes and put it in the correct format that I want. So sometimes we can fix simple mistakes like that. Other times we can't, and we just have to ask the user to try over again. Cool. And then this is another very important question. Where should this validation be taking place? There were two specific places mentioned in the prep work about where validation can happen. Client side or server side. So where should we be doing this? Everywhere. Yeah, why? It seems like overkill, doesn't it? It seems heavy-handed to do it on both. If I already checked it once, do I have to check it again? Yes? Why? I mean, it never hurts to double check something, right? It's always good to be cautious, but we also have to consider, when I say I'm validating on the client side, what does that really mean? What's doing the validation for me? The client's computer, their machine, right? Their machine is doing the validation, so hopefully they'll check stuff before it even gets sent to the server. That's the idea behind client-side validation. It's going to check things and correct mistakes before it even gets sent off across to the server. So server-side validation, of course, is once the data gets to me, I need to check, make sure that the data that I received is reasonable. So again, I ask, why do we have to do it in both? What the heck could happen between the client and the server that could cause something to go wrong? Any ideas? Yeah. Hacking, so somebody could be interfering. Yeah, it could be security types of things. Somebody could be sitting man-in-the-middle attack where they listen to the data, modify it a little bit, and then send it back out, pretend like it's coming from that person. So security implications, or even just plain old, whoops, I lost half your data, right? It gets shipped across the internet and it's like, oh, half of it disappeared, whoops, sorry. Like that stuff happens. We don't like it when it does, but it certainly happens. So those kinds of things, but also this, and I'll show you this actually today in the walkthrough, client-side validation is pretty easy to get around. It's pretty easy to ignore. You can turn off certain scripting things on your computer, which will ignore it entirely, or if you know how to use developer tools on your browser, you can skirt around the client-side validation in other ways. I'll actually show you one example of doing exactly that when we go through the walkthrough today. So it's always good to do things in multiple places. Doing it on the client side is really to make things easier for your user. Doing it on the server side is to protect us. Make sure that we're doing things correctly on our end. What's an escape character? We've actually seen examples of escape characters before. I might have even asked you this question back in Unit 1. What's an example of an escape character? Anybody? So slash is part of it, for sure, yeah. We saw this in Python when we were dealing with strings. So the classic one is new line is an escape character, going to the end of the line. But with web, it's a little bit different. With web stuff, these escape characters are a little bit different. Or maybe a different way of asking this question is, why do we need to escape our text? Yes? Yes, so they can, especially with text boxes are particularly dangerous about this, although other things can be dangerous as well for other reasons. But text boxes especially, they can type in whatever they want. Like most things in programming, there's a comic called XKCD that has, this situation covered where somebody named their student drop tables or something, and it corrupted the entire database when they got entered into the system. I think some of you probably seen that before. So we haven't talked about databases yet, I know, but it's not just HTML that we're worried about. We are worried about HTML, but we're worried about basically any code that people type into a text box. That is a pretty standard way that people will try to hack your websites, is to type code into those text boxes and see if they can trick the server into running it. And if they can, then boom, they got access to all your stuff. So one way that we can prevent against that is to escape things, making sure that if they do type in code, it doesn't get treated as code. How do we do that? What's that look like? We're gonna do this actually in a little bit, but what do I have to do to escape my stuff? It's a module. The CGI module, I believe, does that for me. So we'll actually see an example of that when we go through the walkthrough in just a little bit. String substitution. So this is something that would have really come in handy for us, I think, last week on Thursday when we were writing those big chunks of text in the walkthrough, you remember, and also in the studio. Kind of would have been nice to have some form of string substitution. We just used concatenation instead. But how do we perform string substitution? It's a little bit different than concatenation, or maybe we should talk about that. What's the difference between concatenation and doing string substitution? How do they kind of get us to the same place, but they do it a little bit differently. What is string substitution doing for us? Yes?
Concatenate, you're using plus signs, you're building a string on one piece at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Substitution, you're putting a marker in the middle and then using a method to put it in.
Perfect explanation. Yeah, you nailed it. Concatenation is stitching strings together one piece at a time, whereas substitution is inserting a little placeholder, a little marker somewhere in the middle, and then coming back later and saying, okay, take this value here and stick it where that marker is. Put it in where that marker is. The function that we usually use to do that is a function called format. That's what we're going to see today when we go through the walkthrough as well. And last, but certainly not least, a redirect. How do we do a redirect? That's also is that a module? Is that a function? Where does it come from? Anybody remember?
Part of Flask.
It's part of Flask. Flask allows us to do redirects. So I think it's just a function that we have to call within the Flask library. But why? Why do we bother? What do we need redirects for? What's the point? What is the redirect doing for us? It takes us to a different page, exactly. So why? Why do we do that? Or when have you seen redirects being used when you're browsing around websites? What do you see redirects being used for? Anybody? Yeah. Type in one so I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but it's kind of something that I've seen where if a website, a very popular website, will go out and they'll actually buy other domains, other names that look very similar to theirs. Sometimes they do this to prevent other people from, pretending to be them. Sometimes they do it because they expect people to make little typos, right? So they'll do that and then they'll just redirect you back to where you're supposed to be. Redirect you back to the main page. So that's one common way that we use redirects. Or if a website just up and changes their name entirely, They'll set up a redirect on the old site to the new site to push you over. What else do we use them for? Yeah. Advertising. Can you explain?
Yeah, so like if you click on a link, sometimes it'll take you to like page in between, and that tells them like where the advertising came from.
Like tracking.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, for sure. So we click on a link and it redirects us, or it takes us to one page that then redirects us to some content so that that page in the middle can do something, track us or other information. Sure, that sounds reasonable. What else do we use redirects for? There's one that we're going to use it for today that we haven't talked about yet. Has to do with validation. If our user screws up, they type in bad info, we're gonna ship them back. We're gonna say, go back to the form and try again. We're gonna print out a message. We don't just want to leave them hanging, right? We don't just want to say, hey, you screwed up, and then just sit there. No. We're gonna tell them that they messed up, and then we're gonna send them back to the form so they can try again, and hopefully get it right this time. So that's what we're gonna use redirects for, although they have lots of other uses as well. All right, cool. Before I hop into the walkthrough, do we have any questions about any of this stuff? Or is there anything in the prep work that you were hoping we would talk about today that I didn't get to? We good? All right, let's do the walkthrough. We're gonna continue with flick list. So I'll go ahead and get out of here and open up git bash. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. It's dark in here. Yeah.
In the one article towards the end that we read about the consequences of malicious JavaScript, they talk about phishing. Could you kind of talk more about what phishing is exactly?
What phishing is, sure. I mean, we've all probably dealt with phishing at some point or another. You get people who send you, oftentimes it happens with email, although it doesn't have to be email, where people will say, hey, something's wrong with your account at so-and-so bank. You better send me your login details, or maybe even a little bit more complex would say, go to this page and type in your login information and deal with the problem as soon as you can. But they're not actually your bank, and the page that they send you to is not actually your bank's website. So when you type in your username and password, you just gave them your information, and now they can go to the real bank website and pretend to be you and take all your money. That's phishing. That's really what phishing is. So various techniques can be used. There's not just like one way to do it, but a lot of what they'll try to do is build a website that looks almost exactly like the one that you think it's supposed to be, just looks a little different. So you should be very careful. Most reputable institutions will never ask you to provide them with your username or password. It has to be initiated by you. You have to go somewhere and log in. They're not going to tell you to go do it necessarily. Great question. Any other questions? Any other questions? All right. Let's go ahead and start in on this walkthrough. So I opened up my git bash, and the next thing I need to do is get into my LC101 folder and get into my flick list folder. You can see that I'm still on the Studio 2 branch that we did last Thursday. So I need to switch branches, but before I do, I just want to make sure that I committed the stuff from last Thursday. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do a quick git status, make sure. It looks like I did commit stuff from last Thursday, which is good. I'm actually glad that I did. I don't like to leave stuff uncommitted, so I'm glad that I made a commit here. Everything's good. If you see that you haven't committed, then go ahead and add the file and commit it real quick. And then we'll go ahead and check out the walkthrough 3 branch. We're now on walkthrough 3. And we can go ahead and open this stuff up in our code editor. And get to work. So I'm going to pull up the studio page just to make sure that I don't forget anything that's on our agenda for today. We already did this part. All right, so we're gonna do a couple of things today. Looks like we got 3 main things to do today. One thing that we're gonna do is practice using this formatting method. We're gonna get some practice using this formatting method. We're gonna hard code in a list of movies that we want and then use that list to generate the drop-down box. Here, let me actually show you. I can actually go ahead and start this up. Source, activate, hello Flask. And then just start this up. Actually, while I'm on this particular, I'm going to pause here for a moment to let you catch up to me if you're following along, but also to give a very big public service announcement. A lot of people see this page and they want to visit the website, and so they, will highlight the text and then try to copy it. Copying is Control-C, right? Can't do that. Can't do that. Control-C quits the application. So Control-C is not the right way to copy text out of a terminal. I saw not a lot of people, but I did see, more than a few people have this problem where they started the program, tried to copy this into their browser, and then found out that the page wasn't working because when they copied it, it actually quit. So then when you go to your browser and you paste it in, it tells you that it doesn't know what you're doing. So you can't use Control-C in your terminal. If you really want to copy it, you actually can copy it. You can highlight the text and then right click, select copy, or actually it's telling me on this menu that the hotkey for copying out of the terminal isn't Control-C, it's Control-Insert. So the insert key is one that I bet you guys use all the time. It's usually in the upper left corner of your keyboard. If you even have one, they actually stopped putting them on some keyboards. Like my keyboard actually doesn't have one, which really made me mad. So I forced it. I gave up one of my Alt keys and turned it into an insert key. But anyway, that's beside the point. So you can copy it that way, or honestly, I think the easier thing to do might just be to make a bookmark in your browser for your page. I like to use localhost anyway, so, oh, it's not running because I stopped it. But anyway, just make a little bookmark instead. So that way you don't have to keep copy pasting every time. You can just use your bookmark to get back there. All right, anyway, sorry for the little diversion there. Hopefully this is working now, maybe. It ran successfully, right? Oh yeah. So why isn't this going now? Maybe I'll just close tab and start over again. Localhost 5000, there we go, all right. I'm not sure what it was upset about before, but. So this is where just a little refresher, this is where we ended up on Thursday after the studio. This is the end of Studio 2. So we had a way to quote unquote add movies, and we had a way to quote unquote remove movies, sort of. We're kind of faking it a little bit, and we're going to continue faking it at least a little while longer. But we hard-coded this in. This list was all hard-coded in on Thursday. So we can actually find that in the code. Here we can see, all right, thank you. Here we can actually see this hard-coded list of movies. And what we're saying is, well, we don't want to just hard-code it in. Can we? Well, we're actually still going to hard-code it in a little bit. Maybe hard-code it in a little bit less than it is now. We're going to create a function that lets us access our list of movies. I'm going to make that first, and then we're going to create this list a little bit differently using the format. So let's go ahead and create our list a little bit differently first. This is going to help us with the later part of the walkthrough in the studio today as well. I'm going to create a little function called, what is it called? Let me check my notes here. I'm going to call it get current watch list. And this is going to be one of the simpler functions that we create. I'm just going to create a list of movie titles. So instead of having them, sprinkled throughout my code, I'm just gonna have a list like this. I don't know, what are some other good movies that I've seen recently? That's a good movie. Oh, I misspelled it though. And one more, just one more. How about, it's been a while since I've seen it. Is that one word or two? Only 3 people have seen that movie in this room. Thank you. It's a good movie. I don't care what you think. All right. So we haven't really changed much. Pick whatever movies you want. It doesn't matter. We haven't really changed much. We just took our movies and created a little list and a function instead. And so now what I want to do is, instead of having all of these typed in, instead of having all these movies typed in like this, can we access this list and go through this list and actually create this code using the list instead of having to type each one out inside of each of the option tags? Is it clear kind of what I'm trying to do here? So we can do this, and we're going to, and we're going to use our friend the format function to get us there. So let's go ahead and create a little variable called crossoff options. We're just going to recreate all 4 of these option tags, right? So I want to take this variable and create all of those option tags. I'll just make it be empty for starters, and then we need to figure out how to get more stuff in there. All right. So now I want to visit each element in this list and add it to these cross-off options. So what structure am I going to use to pull that off? A for loop. We've got different kinds of for loops, and I think you could use either kind here that you want. But one of them I think is going to be a bit more straightforward. I'll say, for movie in get current watch list. And now we have to start forming the option tags. So every time I go through this loop, right, every iteration of this loop, I should be creating one option tag for whatever movie I'm currently working on in the list. Does that make sense? I hope. So let's just piece together this option tag real quick and think about what this is going to look like. We can use the option tags that we've got down here as a guide. I want to say option, and then the word value equals, and then this is where the name of the movie is supposed to go, right? So how do I put a placeholder in here so that later on I can substitute in the name of the movie? Curly brackets, and then what? An A? That's not how I remember it. 0, yes. Good. Good. Okay, and then, bracket, and then what comes after this? What comes after the, the option tag and it's the name again. So if I want to put the name in again, what would I say? Same thing. Curly bracket, 0, bracket.
You need to have quotes around for 0.
So I was gonna do this incorrectly and have you guys dig me out of a ditch, but somebody's already trying to dig me out of the ditch, so thank you. What have I done wrong so far? I got weird quotes going on here. So how do I fix it? What do I need to do? How does this work? I want the quotes to be around this guy. So if I put quotes around here like this. So that's kind of what it wants to look like with the quotes and the curly brackets, but you'll notice that looks a little weird, doesn't it? That looks a little strange. How do do I fix that?
Concatenate the plus sign.
Concatenate them with plus signs? I don't think that's gonna get us there, unfortunately. I can use single quotes. If I ever need to use a quotation mark inside of my string, which is exactly what I need to do here, I need to use a double quote inside of my string, then instead of having these guys be double quotes, switch them out for single quotes instead. This is a nice little thing that Python lets you do. This looks better. This looks okay.
You also wrap
Triple quotes, I think, would also work, yes. In fact, we'll probably see an example of that here momentarily. Actually, with triple quotes, we don't even need these. With triple quotes, we don't even need these quotes near the brackets. It's only for single or double quotes that you have to worry about quoting it like this. I know it's a little confusing on the syntax. With syntax, I often find that the best thing to do is not question it, just learn it and move on with your day. If you question syntax, you'll be questioning it for a very long time, and people make some very weird decisions. Most languages are actually pretty straightforward about, hey, this syntax is kind of a little weird. So usually it's not best to question it. Just complain about it to your coworkers and they'll all be happy about that. They're looking for a reason to complain about it, just like you are. All right, so how do we actually do the substitution then? How do I get the movie name in there? I got to use the format function. So how do I do that exactly? Dot, and then it's even offering up format, and then what? Oh wow, this is nice. It tells me how to use the thing. So what am I going to put inside of here? Movie, the name of the movie. Think about what this means. Dot format is, what do we call that? It's a method. Good. It's not a function, it's a method. What's the difference again? It's been a while. It's important though. Method operates on an object. If I call a method, it's always object.method, right? To call a function, I don't have to worry about an object, I just use the function by itself. I just call the function wherever I want. This is a method, which means actually that this stuff over here, this string, is an object, which is hopefully not a hard pill to swallow. All strings are objects. Every single one. So I'm just missing one more piece here. What's the last piece? I need to stash this in a variable. So, oops. Need to stash this in here. And so we'll actually use a little bit of concatenation, right? Go through the loop and concatenate these on one after the other after the other. Everybody good so far? Everybody with me?
the second zero does not need the quotes on it.
The second zero does not need the quotes on it, or it does?
When the option values listed below is only around the first iteration of the name.
Oh, you're right. I see what you're getting at. Thank you. The quotes here represent this guy here. I forgot the quotes around this guy, and I got a little overzealous and I put quotes around that one when I didn't need to. Thank you. Yes?
On the form in get watch list, are you defining the movie variable right there in that statement?
Yes.
Okay. I don't remember seeing that before, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's been a little while since we've gone over these kinds of loops, but they're definitely in the Python textbook, so if you need a little refresher, gosh, I don't remember what chapter it is. It would have been towards maybe like 2/3 of the way in. I want to say chapter 8, chapter 9, somewhere in there, somewhere in that ballpark. And that's okay. I mean, no shame in needing a little refresher. That's why I don't mind asking refresher questions as we go along as well, because we've been moving pretty quickly through this stuff. All right, so now that we have this, we can actually update this as well. That's kind of the point. That's actually why we've been doing all of this, is so that I can take this and get it out of there. I don't like seeing all of these hard-coded in like this. So I want to remove this, how do I then insert what I've created in at this spot? What do I need to say? A placeholder. Can I use the same one as last time, or does it have to be different? I can use the same one. I can use the same one, and then I come down here, and just like we did before, I say format. And then this time I'm going to say cross off options. And so we can actually test this, make sure that it works, save your code, and if you need to, restart the program on git bash. You might not have to, but if you do, you know, whatever you need to do, refresh your page, and now you can see, I think I still misspelled that movie, whatever. It's not important. Actually, it's gonna bother me. There's an E in there. I had it right the first time, and then I think I changed it. I don't remember. Basketball. Yeah, it's by the guys who made South Park. It's pretty funny.
Ferngully is one word.
Ferngully is one word? You guys lied to me.
Capital G.
Capital G, though?
Yep.
Oh, so it's like camel case.
Yep.
Wow, that's kind of meta. All right. I'm cool with that. Thank you. Anyway, you know, save it. Make sure that it works the way that you expect it to. Make sure everything looks okay. That still looks weird to me, but whatever. I'm not gonna stop worrying about it. Somebody's out there Googling it right now, I promise. That's okay. It's fine. Are there any questions? I have a question for you, but are there any questions before that? Yes?
I'm a little confused. I thought that maybe cross-off options need to be an empty list. I'm not sure how it's working with those stop lists.
Not sure how it's working. I'm sorry.
Well, an empty string,
Yes.
not an empty list. I'm just not sure how it's working. I would assume you need a list to access index values or something, but it's obviously working. So I just don't know.
Well, the list is our current watch list. This is our list, right? Here's our list. So we're iterating through this list and constructing a string using these values, the string being cross-off options. That's why cross-off options starts as an empty string, and then we slowly add to it. I mean, in fact, if we want to know what cross-off options looks like, I'm actually glad you asked. We can view page source, and then, you know, what does cross-off options look like? But by the time we're done, it looks like this. This section of code that I've highlighted here is what is in cross-off options. So you can see that it's just all of the options smashed together. The formatting is even a little off, you can see. So it's looping through, and every time through the loop, it's concatenating on another option to that string. It's actually important that it's a string and not a list, because if it were a list instead of a string, we wouldn't be able to use it with the format command down here. This is expecting a string, so we would have, or we might have been able to use it, but it wouldn't have worked the way that we wanted to. We would have had to use it in a different way. Which actually leads me to my question for you all. Why is this a 0 in here? Is it always going to be a 0? 0 is a starting point. So what is the 0 referring to then? The first item in the list, right? The first item in the list. So if I want to do multiple substitutions, I can put in a 1 or a 2, but then I have to specify, you know, another string after this one. What's interesting is that we use 0 twice here, right? So I took the same value and I substituted it in twice, and I used the same placeholder twice to accomplish that, which is very convenient, so that I don't have to keep typing the same thing out over and over again. Any other questions? Yes?
So, at the end of Thursday, we talked about how, like, they don't have to be the same, like, it could be matrix, or you could call it, you could write star words and then
Yeah.
have it actually give star, correct?
Yeah.
And so in that case, you might want to use LC101?
Yeah, for sure. That's absolutely true. I think in this particular situation, it's okay that they're named the same thing, but in other situations, it's possible that you wouldn't want them to have the same names, in which case, yes, switch one of these up, make it a different placeholder. Absolutely. Good observation.
Why did we not need to use an app route in front of that function?
In front of this guy here?
Yeah.
Why didn't we need a route in front of this? That's a great question. Can somebody help me out?
It just needs to run.
It's not a web page. Get current watch list, that's not a web page. That's just a function that we're using for our own convenience to help us out with other stuff. In fact, there's nothing to stop us from creating however many functions we want if it'll make our lives easier. The only functions that show up as web pages are the ones that have the route in front of them. So however many web pages you actually want, stick routes on them, but I'm not limited to that. I can add other things on there if it'll make my life easier. Great question. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I think it's another thing which was asked about a few questions ago, but on line 34 and 35, why is that a function versus just a list? Get current watch list equals that list.
So there's two reasons why we did it this way. There's two reasons why we made this function and had it return a list. One is we're about to use this again later on in our code, and having it in one place is going to be convenient for us. So accessing it through this function is going to be convenient for us instead of having to write out the list every time. But then in the future, what we're going to do is actually, this list is problematic as well, right? This list is no good. So we're going to have to access the list in a different way, and this is also kind of setting us up for that. We're going to have to access the list by actually recording people's selections in a data store, and so this method then will have to access the data store and pull out the list information that way, and we're sort of setting ourselves up for that as well. I kind of understand what you're getting. It seems to me like you're kind of asking why we didn't just create a variable up here called watch list, right? That seems like what you're getting at. I understand, and that's a very valid question. You could do it this way if you really want to. If you don't like what I did here, you could do it this way. I wouldn't stop you either. I think it's totally fine for what we're doing for right now. But in the future, it's going to be helpful to have this function. That's why we put it in. Yes. Yeah, go for it.
I'm looking for the action part of cross-off form, is that the dot format, the object dot method? Like, I understand, like, in cross-off options that we're iterating through a for loop, then where do we call on cross-off form, or do we not? Is the dot format making it go? I don't know.
Are you asking where we use this variable? Is that?
Yeah.
I believe that's what we did back on Thursday. This is part of the studio.
Oh, okay. There we go. I just couldn't
Yeah.
see it on my page.
No, that's all right. That's okay. We ready to keep going? Any other questions? All right, fantastic. So we finished the first step of our studio. The second step we want to do is a little bit of validation. So inside of this cross-off method that we did last Thursday in studio, we want to do some validation. We want to make sure that when they remove a movie, it's on their watch list, that the movie that they're removing is on that list. So we're already going to reuse that list, as I was mentioning. If it's not on the list, then we're going to redirect them back, and we're going to pass along an error message saying you've tried to remove a movie that's not on your list. And then we're going to have to escape the error message as well. So we've got some work cut out for us. Let's go ahead and start by finding our cross-off method. That's right here. That's right here. So what's the name of the movie called that they're trying to remove? We already have that. Crossed-off movie. This is what they're trying to get rid of. This is the movie that they're trying to remove. So what we're trying to say is if this movie is not on their watch list, then we've got an error. So we're trying to do some validation. So let's say that. How do I check to see if this movie is on their watch list? What do I need to say? For loop? We could use a for loop. I think there's an easier way. If crossed off movie not in, there we go. And then to access my watch list, I would just say get current watch list. So if this happens, we have a problem, right? If this happens, if I end up inside of this if statement, we have a problem. We have an error. They tried to remove a movie that was not in their watch list. So we need to, based on what the studio was saying, we need to come up with an error message and then send them back. Send them back to the form. Yes?
If the cross-off movie thing is a drop-down menu, doesn't that sort of remove the need for this?
Yes. So the question was, if the cross-off movie is a drop-down, then how will this ever happen, right, is sort of the general idea. And I will show you exactly that. Let's do this first, and then I will show you how we can get around the drop-down menu a little bit later. It's a great question, very valid question. All right. So if we get here, we have a problem. So we need to, first thing we need to do is create an error message. And I want my error message to say, the name of this movie is not on your watch list, where, you know, we fill in the name of the movie that they selected, right? And we could use concatenation for this. I agree with you entirely. It might even be easier to use concatenation in this particular situation, but we're using the format function today. So we're going to continue using the format function today just to get more practice with it. So I'm going to go ahead and create an error message. It says something along the lines of the name of my movie. So I'm going to have to use a placeholder for that, right? The name of my movie is not in your watch list. Pick another one. I'll go ahead and call format on this guy and pass in the crossed off movie. If I can find it. Crossed. Oh gosh. There it is. I don't know why. Okay. I just wrote one line of code. It was kind of a long line of code, but I'll pause here just to make sure we're on the same page. While we're taking a little breather, we can explain what we're going to do next. We're going to redirect them back to the form, and we're going to send this error message along. What kind of method does redirect use? When I issue a redirect, what kind of method is it using? A GET request? I think you're right. It's doing a GET request. It's doing a GET request. So if I want to take this error message and send it along with my request, what am I going to have to do? I have to pass it how? What's that called? It's a query parameter. How do I know I have query parameters? What do I see? The question mark in the URL? Good. Good. Let's do that next. I'm going to redirect, which is just as simple as calling the redirect function. It's part of Flask already. I'm going to redirect this, and then, I want to send them back to the page with the form on it. What's the address of that? Just that, the page with the form on it? What's that called? Just slash. That's the root. But I want to tack on this error message. So we just said that means I need to put in a question mark for a query parameter. I need to give this parameter a name, error, the equal sign, and I mean, we could use format here, but whatever. I'll just do concatenation. Take this error that I created, redirect them back. Does this make sense what we did here? Any questions?
Put that whole error message in the URL.
It will, yes. Do you not like that? It's okay if you don't. It's okay if you don't. I'm glad that you're asking these kinds of questions. Yes, it will put the entire error message in the URL. And if you don't like that, I don't blame you. And we will see other ways of handling this particular situation as we move forward. But for now, we're gonna give this a go. Is there another question? Yeah.
Can you explain big picture one more time, why the dot format is the query parameter, and like why we, like, why we're doing that?
I'm sorry? I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I guess my question is, how do you know that it's a query parameter, or that you need to put this in that redirect?
So if we see a query parameter, if we see a question mark, that's an indication that we have a query parameter.
Right, so how do you know you need
Well, I need to have some way of passing this error message back to this page. I'm sending them over to this page, but I also want to tell them what they did wrong. So I need to send this error message to the original page so that they know what they did wrong. They can see this message and know what the problem was. Yes.
Okay, and so they're only gonna see it in the URL then after that question?
No, we're gonna fix that.
Oh, okay.
We're not done yet.
Okay.
We're gonna fix that in a moment. Any other questions? Yes.
Don't we have to import redirect up top?
Ah.
Yeah, we don't have,
We don't have to?
no, we don't have it on.
Oh, we don't have it, yeah. What is it, redirect? Boom. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Anything else? Okay, so we just added 3 lines of code here, right? Not a ton of code, but it's, let's make sure we get the concept down. We check to see if there's a problem, we create an error message, and then we send them back to the form page along with the error message. So it sends them both. So now we need to think about, okay, what happens when they get there? We just sent them back to the main page with this error message. We need to grab that error message and show it to them. We need to grab that error message and show it to them. So this puts us in a little bit of an awkward position. We can solve this problem, but it is a problem we need to think about. When I visit this form, sometimes there will be an error message that I need to deal with, and sometimes there will not, right? We need to be able to handle both situations. We need to be able to handle both situations, when there's an error message and when there is not. Right now, we're handling the case where there's not an error message just fine. This is the method. And if there are no errors, this is just fine. But we've now introduced this concept of an error, so we need to fix this up. Let me just make sure I'm in the right place. All right. We need to fix this up to check to see if we have an error, and if we do, show it to them. So I need to check to see if we have an error. How do I access that error message? What do I need to say to get that error message that I sent? What kind of method are we using again? A get. So we sent the error message as a query parameter. So how do I access that query parameter? Request.args.get, and then inside of here, I just put the name of the parameter that I want. If an error message exists, this will give me the error message that was sent. What if an error message doesn't exist? What will this give to me? None. It'll give me null. None, right? So let's store this in a variable and then check it. The easiest way to check for if something is none or not, right, is just say if, and then the name of the thing. If it exists, well, this is true. If it doesn't exist, if it's none, this is false. So this is just a quick and easy check to see, yeah.
Could we just put the request in the if statement?
Could we put the request in the if statement? But I don't know if I have an error or not until I check the parameter, correct?
Okay, so the if statement won't respond to not. It'll just assume it's true then?
if the variable doesn't exist, we have a problem, right? I mean, what would you be checking? That's my question for you. If we want to delay this, how would we know if we have an error or not? I don't know if I have an error or not until I check the query parameter, right? Does that make sense? So,
Yeah, that's
put everything, what now?
you say, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Don't even bother making the
But we need this. I need this message for later. So, I mean, we could do it that way, but then I'm going to have to double dip and ask this question twice because I have to get the message and print it out, right? So this is just saving us a trip. So if the error message exists, we just need to, create a little error element. Error elements equals. I'm going to stick a p tag in there and we'll make this class error. When we do CSS, what we'll do is we'll use this class to highlight all this text red so they can see the red error message. But we haven't really done a whole lot of CSS stuff yet, so we're not going to worry about that for right now. That's something that we'll definitely do later though. I should put quotes around that. Plus error plus /p. Okay. We do need an else down here as well. If I don't have an error, the error element should just be an empty string. Should just be blank. Yes, please.
Are we using the word error like a lot of times?
Sure.
So would you mind like changing the variable error to something, and where else would that
This
be?
one?
Yeah, like if we just called that returned error or something, then would it just change?
I mean,
Sure.
it would,
Be there,
yeah,
and it would be
here and here.
there,
Yep.
but not inside any HTML.
Nope. I understand what you're getting at, and you're correct. We are using the word error a lot here. This one, the stuff inside of this function refers to what? The name of the query parameter is what that refers to. The name of the query parameter. So if I change this to something else, what else would I have to change? If I change this to, something, what else would I have to change? What I called it in the query parameter, which happens up here in the redirect, that's what this is. So those have to match, right? That's what those are referring to. This is just a Python variable, so, call it whatever you want. This is a class, which honestly, we can change the name of this as well. In fact, we don't even really need to include it for the sake of this walkthrough. If you leave it off, it's not going to break anything. It's just included so that we can do some CSS with it later in the future. We're almost done. We're almost ready to actually test this out. The last thing that we need to do is stick the error element onto the page. So we'll just put it in here after the form. And then we'll test it out. All right. We're ready to test this. Now, the interesting thing is that if we go to the page and we just select a movie from our dropdown, as we've been doing, let me refresh this real quick. If I just select a movie from the dropdown as I've been doing, right, it's just going to work exactly the same way. So how do I even check this? How do I even check to see if the redirect is working? How do I force it to make an error when all I've got to work with is this combo box. I could put a query parameter up here in the URL. That is true. That only tests 1/2 of what we've done though, right? That only tests this page. It does not test the, the validation side, right? It only tests the error message. Does not test the validation. I can do both. I can do both at once, actually. And the way to do that is to open up our developer tools. So on Chrome, on Windows, the way to do that is with Control-Shift-I. If you're on a Mac or a different browser, it might be something a little bit different, but we've seen these before. I can tinker around with this in my browser and do, this is a little trippy, isn't it? Can change these values in my browser to test various things. And so that's what we're going to use it for now. I want to find where that drop-down box is, and I want to change it. I want to change it a little bit. So I can see that it's inside of this form, right? I can see that it's inside of, I can see that it's inside of here. Here's my combo box. You see I found it. Or if you wanted to right-click it and select, inspect element, you could do that way as well. And now, if I want to break something, what should I change in here? One of the values. Change one of the values. Does that make sense? If I change one of these values, I don't know. Man, I'm really bad at coming up with movies. Doesn't matter. Change one of these values to be something else, right? This is just temporary, right? When I make changes like this, it's just temporary. If I refresh the page, the change is gone, right? But we can use this to check our code to make sure that it works. I have now changed this value to something else. And so now when I click this button, it looks like I'm trying to remove, actually I need to make sure that this one is selected. It looks like I'm trying to remove the matrix from my watch list, which is something I would never do anyway. And instead, it's trying to remove total recall from my watch list, because that is what the value is now. That should cause a validation error, correct? Because total recall is not on my watch list. So now I can check to see, does the validation work? Does the error message get sent? And does the error message get displayed? Do we do the redirect, the whole deal from start to finish? So this is sort of the moment of truth to see if this works or not. Click the button. Uh-oh, we screwed up. All right, let's figure out what went wrong. That's okay. Shouldn't have done that, but let's figure out what went wrong. Clearly something is off. So let's figure it out. I didn't get off of this cross-off page, so I know that the error is somewhere on my cross-off. It has to be somewhere in there, right? There has to be in the cross-off. So let's go back and take a look at the cross-off method and see if we can figure out what the heck happened.
You didn't change content.
Didn't change content?
Yep.
I don't think I ever would have gotten there though. I don't think, so when this redirect hits, right, I should never even get to this stuff. It didn't return? Is that what I'm missing? Oh, okay, that's probably what I'm missing. My fault. But, that's it. One word. That's programming, honestly. I was helping people out the other day that were, one comma was off and it brought their whole program down. That's computers, unfortunately. Okay, let's try it again. We fixed it, or we think we fixed it. Let's try it again. Repeat the process. We need to get back to the original page. I'm just gonna refresh it once just for good measure. I need to switch this again. Doesn't really matter what you switch this to. And we'll try again. I'm gonna click the button. Hey. So let's think about what happened. Let's pay attention here for a second, right? I went to cross-off. I went to the cross-off page. Cross-off got the parameter and said, I don't know what this is. This is junk. You gave me bad data. And then it sent us back. But on the way back, it tacked on an error message. You can see the error message down here at the bottom. You can also see the error message chilling out up here in the URL as a query parameter. Right? There it is. We did it. We set out what we accomplished to do. Yes? Yeah, %20. What is that? Space. It's a space. Spaces and URLs don't work. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a URL with a space in it. It doesn't work. It has to be one long continuous thing without spaces in it. So if we have spaces that need to be sent in our URL, it replaces them with that %20. That %20 is actually the ASCII value for a space. It's just the ASCII value for a space. Cool. Is there any other questions? I feel like there's probably some other ones. Yeah. Yours is showing it with spaces. What browser are you using? Firefox? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not a big Firefox user, so that's interesting that they have made that choice. I don't think that would work on Chrome, but I could try it and see. Oh, see, it automatically swapped it back out. I put the space in and it just automatically swapped it out. So Chrome is trying to fix my stuff for me. Yep. Actually, this brings us to a good thing to do to wrap this up. We could actually, this error message could be a little bit problematic. In fact, I think the studio mentioned something about this. Spaces aren't allowed in URLs. So the browser kind of bailed us out on this one. We shouldn't necessarily trust the browser. In this case, we got lucky. The browser bailed us out. It saw the spaces, it automatically swapped them. Or what's it called when I see a bad character and I swap it out for a good one? Escape. It escaped it. It escaped that. So, okay, we could actually escape the error message ourselves so that the browser doesn't have to. We could actually escape that error message ourselves. So, if we wanted to do that, where would that happen? Where would we want to escape this? Right here? So by the time I do the redirect, it's, if I redirect to the other page, it's too late. I've already put the message in there, right? So if I'm gonna escape this, I need to do it here. So I can do that. In fact, this is just another line or two of code that we would need to do to escape this message. And this will be the end of the walkthrough today. It'd be what, CGI.escape, I think. And then I just pass in the thing. Is there anything else I need to tell it? I'm sorry? Oh, I need to import it, thank you. So this will escape our error message for us, and that way our browser doesn't have to. You might be wondering, well, what's the point? If the browser's doing it for us, then it's already doing a pretty good job, right? If somebody's using an old browser or a weird browser that's not Chrome or Firefox, maybe their browser wouldn't do it for them. So it's definitely safer to do it before the browser has to. This is definitely safer in the long run. And if we did everything right, we would notice absolutely no changes to our website whatsoever. It should work exactly the same as it did before. It's just a little bit safer now. It's just a little bit more safe now. Are there any questions? Yes?
Why are we displaying the error message in the URL?
Why are we displaying the error message in the URL? So if I didn't want to display this up here, what would I need to do?
Remove it from the redirect.
Did you pass it as an argument?
Pass it as an argument in a post request, so that's one possible option, but forming post requests is actually a lot more difficult than using query parameters. So that's one reason why we did it. It's just a lot simpler, a lot more straightforward than trying to form a post request. Actually, in the future, what we can do is have a form validate itself. So instead of validating on the cross-off page, we can actually have the form validate itself before it leaves the page, and that way we don't even need to do a redirect anymore. And so that will eliminate the query parameters at that point. Honestly, I don't think it's unusual to see error messages up here. In fact, I would encourage you to go home and pay attention to the websites that you use. Maybe the next time you buy that thing on Amazon, you should try to type something in incorrectly and see what happens. If it's a credit card number or something, it's not going to put that in the URL. But for other more innocuous stuff, it actually might put that in the URL. I mean, look at, like, you know, the classic example. I don't know if I showed you this the other day, but if I go to Google and search for something, you know, look at how much junk they're putting up here. Does that bother you? Doesn't seem to bother them, or they wouldn't do it, right? I mean, I can see that there's what I'm actually searching for, the word cats. What's all the rest of this stuff? I don't know. Big Brother watching me, probably, right? It doesn't even look like it makes sense, but they don't mind sticking it up in the URL. They're not worried about it. So, I guess the moral of the story I'm trying to get at is that for things like this, it's not the worst thing in the world to have it up there. If Google can do it, then so can we.
Could you go back to the code?
Sure, I'm happy to go back to the code. In fact, I'll leave the code up here as you guys get moving. However, I want you to also remember that when you start on Studio, which we're going to do here in just a moment, you're going to check out the Studio 3 branch, and this code's going to be in there. Maybe not exactly like this, but more or less this code is going to be in there. So if you want to review the solution, just check out the Studio 3 branch before you begin the Studio, and it'll all be there. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yeah, in the back. That's this line right here where we did this movie substitution.
I have exactly what you have.
I'd be happy to take a look at it when we break up into groups and check it out. Anything else? All right, let's do it. Let's break up into our groups. Get started on that Studio. We'll review the Studio at 8 o'clock like we usually do. I'll see you then. Also, if somebody near the lights could switch those on for me, that would be great.